First of all, if I am a farmer and I pay the vet that comes out to me, has that vet or some vet that got the licence from me to practice, is that the person that has to get the money? This is what I know more than the TB thing.
As a regulator, Deputy Fitzmaurice, we, the council, have never been involved in terms of pricing or payment. Is, you know, no more than, say, the pharmaceutical.
I didn't ask you that. I says you give a licence.
Yeah.
You said a person, the licence that you give is to a practitioner.
Yeah.
That has the certification and everything.
Yeah.
So what you are saying is that that person basically is the only one that has that licence, so that's the only person that can charge him. Or if it's somebody working for a vet that is a vet. But are you stating to us here that that vet, if they're working for somebody that isn't a vet, that they shouldn't be paid?
No, we're not stating that. We have no control over you know, who bills and who gets paid. That's just
1 second. When you said, you spoke earlier on, and you said when you give out a licence, there's things about service.
Yeah.
And by the way, will you tell me what is the hours of service? You said there's 24 hours. What is the mandatory limit or the mandatory time that a vet is to come to a farmer?
So attached to the licence is
I'm just asking in general.
Yeah, is making arrangements for the provision of 24-hour care. So for emergencies. So if I'm a vet and I am away for the weekend, I might ask my my neighbouring practice to provide call for my clients during that time. So equally, say practices around Leinster might refer matters to UCD Veterinary Hospital. So it's so that there are arrangements in place for the provision of emergency care around the clock, and that is linked to the licence, the certificate of suitability for any premises.
So when you give out the licence, if I'm the vet in the area and 3 more vets in the area decide we're going away for a lovely weekend, and there's someone 40 miles away that said, yeah, we'll cover you, is there any regulation on the price?
No.
No. So you're leaving it wide open under this, that a whole county could be left with one vet over a weekend if everyone took it off and I was the person that said I covered. And you think that's a good service to farmers, and you're the Veterinary Council?
And look, I mean, there's been no change in relation to, you know, to that requirement for 24-hour provision of care. We don't and we can't control every facet of every practice around the country.
Look let's open this out, and we're dancing around here trying to be careful of legal and all of this. Let's put it out in the open. What's happening in this country at the moment is that there is corporate identities coming in, trying to buy out practices, trying to control areas, and they will dictate the pace and they will dictate the whole lot. So let it out in the open there. You're trying to dance around it. I know that you're under certain legal things. But for farmers and for a service in rural areas, we are seeing parts of the country, I'm not going to name any, but there are deputies here from some of them, where it is scandalous what farmers were being priced and the service they're getting. And are we going down a road that we're going to let English corporates come in and destroy the whole industry, or are we going to bring in whatever legislation or whatever way it has to be nailed? Second of all, question for you. When the decision was taken, can you name the people in December 17 at that meeting, or how many is on it? And do you think that anyone had a conflict of interest?
I mean, you talk about, you know, service in different remote areas, you know, parts of the country, be it Donegal, be it, you know, Mayo, be it Kerry. There are, I suppose, without question, there's the potential for shortages of vets around the country, and that's nothing to do with ownership. You know, there are loads of challenges for the professions. That's an area that we hope the council will be able to assist in terms of providing research, some analysis in the data that we hold in time. It's referenced in our strategy. Your second question in relation to members of the council present at a council meeting when a decision was taken, I don't have the list of members on me, I'm being honest.
Can you forward it to the chairman?
That I certainly can, but what I can say is that any decision of the council is a binding decision, regardless, once that meeting is quorate, regardless of who sits at that table. And all members of the council, when they sit at that table, wear public interest hats. They don't carry their own interests. They don't, they don't peddle for their own, for their own vested interests. They sit there as a regulator wearing public interest hats, bringing particular expertise and experience to bear.
They would have to acknowledge to the others if there was a conflict of interest, would they?
Absolutely. Frequently you'll see committees and council members leaving, absenting themselves, having declared a conflict.
Could you send that list to the chairman? And could we get that as soon as possible? The one thing, is there legislation or is there something that can be done? Because like we're dancing around, there's a fourth party here that's nearly the invisible man, but it's the most important person, to be quite frank about it, because they're the new person in the game. There are none that everyone is saying doesn't exist, but they're there, and whether we want to admit that or not. Is there legislation or something that we can make sure the system we have in a lot of parts of this country, the vets and the service they give is second to none? You can get a vet in most parts of this country quicker than you can get a doctor if you were sick. Now, we are in danger, whether we want to shy away from it or not look at this invisible thing. We are in danger at the moment that conglomerates are going to come into this country, mop them up because they'll have the money, and then the farmer is the one that will pay the price, and sadly the animal is going to pay the price because you wanted the service. Is there something, be it through the Department of Agriculture, through government, through this committee, or through the Veterinary Federation, is there something that can be done to block this type of a loophole that's in the system, to make sure that the system that has worked for so long is going to be left?
I don't believe that it is sustainable for ownership to be restricted to profession. It isn't the case in relation to medics, it isn't the case in relation to pharmacists, it isn't the case in relation to dentists, and I don't think it's a sustainable or necessarily a wise provision in relation to veterinary. I'm not sure that the esteemed House of the Oireachtas would be enabled to pass legislation to that effect, and I'm not sure any member of the High Court bench would approve of any such legislation, but ultimately legislation is a matter, for this committee and for the House of the Oireachtas. That is the honour you're charged with. I do think that there is a role for the Veterinary Council. Yes, there is the potential for shortages of vets in different parts of the country. There absolutely is. Is it something that the Council has on its radar? Is it an area that they want to take some action on and be involved in? Yes. The Council has access to a huge amount of data. No great analysis of that data has been carried out to date. One of the strategic objectives identified by this Council is to seek to influence and inform and engage with partner bodies. It is potentially open to the Council to carry out some research on all of the information that they have. So at the moment, the Council are sitting on data for every registrant. So what age they are, where they are physically in practice around the country in terms of geographics, what area of practice they're in. So in theory, is it open to the Council to be able to foresee potential shortages around the country 10, 15, 20 years down the tracks? Absolutely. So I would hope, and the Council are looking at the potential to carry out some research, to maybe work with the Department in terms of influencing policies around these kinds of areas, because you're absolutely right, Deputy Fitzmaurice, areas of very remote practice potentially will be under threat, and that is an area that all of society needs to be concerned with. So yes, I believe there is a role for the Council there, but whether or not there's a legislative basis to be involved in that, I don't believe.
Can it not be made mandatory that a veterinary a person, that when you have the certificate to be a veterinary inspector or a vet, that a vet has to own the practice? Or fine if it's the bank or whoever, we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is hidden money from out abroad of conglomerates that's coming in. And can we not make sure that the person you pay is either an employee of a vet or that they're a vet that owns it? Because if we don't do that, we are walking a lot of the country, because look, at big business is big business, whether we like that or not. And we are going to see areas of this country that you might travel 50 miles to get a vet.
Scanlon.
Yeah, if I could. In fairness, we've never had as many registrants on our register as we currently have, and yet there is always, and it is, as a registrar has pointed out, nothing to do with ownership. It has been for 10 years or more quite difficult to get vets to work in large animal practice, which is the tougher end of the game, longer hours, tougher work, and often the remuneration would not match what expectation would be. The money is simply not in it. We need only look at what the beef industry is saying, how cost of production is below, cost of beef is below cost of production, and if the person who's involved in that has to pay for a veterinary service, you can see how the pressure would be at all times to keeping those costs down. So it's very hard to get vets to work in rural parts, even on the east coast, even on the northeast coast, even in the centre of the country. It's quite hard to get vets to do. Yet we have.
I beg to differ, I'm in the west, which is generally the poor relation, and I will say one thing: we have a good veterinary service in a lot of areas around, very, very good. And I do think, and I'd say this openly to you, for youngsters that want to go into veterinary, generally you have to have, I don't know, 580 or 600, 570 or 80 pints. There's many a person that have been brought up that might have 520 or 30 and they never get in. They'll head off to some other country and have to become a vet through another door. And I'd advise you to look at that situation as well, for the simple reason there's many a person that might be damn glad to handle those bigger animals that you talk about. I know that there's a lot going for the smaller ones, but there's one thing sure, that in my own neck of the woods, we have a great service, I will say that. But if we keep going down the road that we're going down, of conglomerates coming in, we'll probably have one vet in the west of Ireland.
Two things, if I could, just 2 points from. Thank you very much, I'd agree with you completely. It is something we are looking at. It is something that's, that we're looking at, the provision of the education, because in fairness, there are more now going abroad than there are even, or not even so much more, but there are many, many more going abroad. And when we look at it in numbers to our own college, so perhaps there is time that we needed a second college, and perhaps that's definitely the case. But I will say to you, we're extraordinarily proud. We're extraordinarily proud of the service that is out there, the veterinary service, in every parish, in every country, extraordinarily proud of it. But any employer of vets at the moment will tell you to try and get, when you put in an ad to try and get a vet to fill for those sort of duties, it is very, very hard to get them.